We'll start out just by doing a couple of introductions. My name is Erik Stanfield. I'm an anthropologist. I work for the Navajo Nation Heritage and Historic Preservation Department, and I run the nation's monitoring program. And we try to help give recommendations on how to best run the dam and all of the complexities that come with that. I'll say a little bit more about all of that later, but James Sita.
Hello, uh, I'm Jamesita Peshlikai, and when I participated in the river trip, I was a tribal liaison for the Bureau of Reclamation, and I worked with 5 tribes: the Kaibab Paiute, the San Juan Southern Paiute, the Navajo, the Hopi, and the Zuni tribes. And the Navajo Nation had their annual river trip, and they were kind enough to invite me, and I was grateful for that. And I'm here to share my perspective about the river and that trip. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think James might be online. I don't know if he can speak, but James Foguth was the director and produced the film for us. So I wanted to make sure I recognized him. He did a fabulous job and was basically a one-man show to get all of this together. So James, if you're on there, we appreciate that, and maybe we can talk a little bit more later. But to go ahead and move on, I wanted to just frame a little bit about what the program is that we work on, and then we'll watch the film and we'll have a discussion about it. So let's see if I can make sure I get this to work. There we go. Okay. So the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program, some folks might be familiar, some might not. So I'll say a little bit about what it is. Oh, hey guys. Um, the Adaptive Management Program was set up when in the 1990s, when they realized that, surprise, the Glen Canyon Dam is going to have some effects on the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. So it's a federal advisory committee, and it has about 25 stakeholders involved, and they all get together and they give input. And the group then goes and tries to give recommendations to the Bureau of Reclamation on how they can operate the dam in the way that not only is minimally impactful to the natural and cultural resources downstream, but in some ways tries to benefit them. So this is just a little bit of how the process works. We have the dam, we have the river, we have all of the resources, and then we have adaptive management, right? So here we go. This shows a little bit about how complicated it gets in terms of who all is involved. Here you can see, as James Sita mentioned, we have 5 different tribes involved. We have several different federal agencies: the Bureau of Reclamation, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Department of the Interior, National Park Service, WAPA, all of the states, the USGS. So there's a lot going on in this program, right? And the way that adaptive management actually works is that you have the USGS, whose responsibility it is to basically do science down there. They know they can't do all of the science, right? They know how to measure sediment. They know how to monitor archaeological sites. They know how to count fish. But something that they are lacking is being able to kind of represent the cultural aspects from the local tribes. So each tribe has a monitoring program, and does a trip each year. So we work on the Navajo Nation program, and we go down there and we make observations with community members, with we bring Navajo water rights experts with us. folks from our own fish programs, our own archaeologists, and medicine people as well. And in doing that, we will produce a set of recommendations and try to use that to kind of influence the way that this big complicated system works. And one thing I think is important to mention about how adaptive management works and all is it's you're operating this complicated system with flows and how you're generating electricity. What are the temperatures of the lake and when it gets into the water, the pressure, how much sediment is in it. The program attempts to learn about all of these things and see what the effects are, and then see how we can balance them out. And the reason why that's important and why it overlaps fairly well with kind of Navajo traditional teachings is that Hojo essentially means harmony and balance. And that is what this program is trying to attempt, even though it's explained in a much more kind of scientific way. But we always think that that's important to point out because that is really what the Navajo Nation's adaptive management program is attempting to share, right? We're looking at what are the federal agencies, the scientists missing? What can we contribute so we can make this a more balanced kind of holistic scheme of knowledge? So the river trips, I went over this a little bit already to talk about like what's the actual value of this. One thing that is a great benefit in doing a program like this and being able to bring Navajo people, scientists, experts, medicine people on the river is that it provides that access and that ability to be on the river and to work together. And though that's not the kind of original intent, it's really important because it gets people in a small group to talk together about cultural teachings and to kind of reaffirm the relationship with that place. Some of it is actually about going and doing the ceremonies at the places where there may not otherwise be the opportunity to do that. So it produces knowledge that helps federal decision makers make decisions, but it also helps kind of keep these traditions and the knowledge going by being there and allowing cultural experts, elders to communicate this with younger people that come on the trips as well. So there's kind of extra benefits to all of this. So I think with that, we'll go ahead and show the film, and then we can have a discussion after. Jamesita, is there anything you'd like to add before we start?
I was making notes and then I lost my way in my notes.
And then I surprised you with a question.
Yes, there's one thing that I would like to add though, that there's many people that were part of this putting this together, and the actual program that funded this is in the Glen Canyon Dams Adaptive Management Program, which is within the Bureau of Reclamation, within the Department of Interior. And in that 5-year plan that the tribes and the government signed, was the people that the tribes involved wanted a culturally sensitive, appropriate inclusion of the tribes in there. And so in discussing how to do this, the tribes were given their opportunity to create an educational, culturally educational material to share with the government and like those of us here in the room and so on and so forth. So each, this is specifically what the Navajo Nation decided to do, and other tribes did other things. So I just wanted to let folks know that this was really the creation of the people that really wanted to share how much of the canyon that it's really complex, and you'll see that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. So with that, we'll go ahead and view the film. Thank you.
This land, this river, has always been our relative. It's where life begins, where stories live.
Hey, 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 oh, 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 hey, 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 hey,
For the Navajo Nation, our participation in this program isn't just science. It's about land, history, identity, and remembering who we are. Navajo fundamental law teaches us that the land and all the living beings, its animals, plants, and waters, are not merely commodities or resources to be exploited, but are sacred entities with inherent rights. This worldview guides not only our environmental ethics, but also our multifaceted commitments to stewardship. And within the Glen Canyon Adaptive Management Program, that perspective guides how we protect what is sacred. The rivers are like veins of the land. They keep the whole body alive. Caring for land and water in a way that maintains harmony for future generations is not a new idea. For the Navajo, it's an ancient obligation. In the past, however, outside decisions, whether through laws, policies, or resource development, often restricted Navajo access to land and waters and limited participation in managing them. These decisions impacted families and communities and disrupted life-sustaining natural systems. But today, a shift is underway. Awareness is growing, recognizing the value of including Indigenous knowledge and leadership. Programs like the Glen Canyon Adaptive Management reflect that shift, offering space for Navajo voices to guide land and river management in ways that reflect our cultural values and responsibilities.
Since about 1992, we worked with local communities that border the Grand Canyon and to collect Navajo history in and around the Grand Canyon. So much of that information is in a 1992 report called Nez, the River of Never-Ending Life. And that is really the basis of the work we're still doing today. What the purpose of the whole program is to make sure that Navajo cultural resources and natural resources are considered in the decision-making in the operations of Glen Canyon Dam.
What does it mean to learn from a river? Not to study it as an object or manage it as a task, but to listen, to be taught the way you would listen to a grandparent. When the river speaks, it speaks in relationships, in the joining of waters, in the presence of beings who have always lived there. What happens when a place teaches you how to live? It teaches respect for the land, for each other, and for the many ways knowledge is carried.
I am sitting at the tributary, the Little Colorado River, where it joins the Big Colorado River, what is known as the confluence of the Colorado rivers in the Grand Canyon. I am a member of the Navajo tribe, and I was born and raised in the Western Agency in Coconino County. My memories of my elders' teachings of the confluence is that this is where the holy people reside. This is where they live, they laugh, they play, they pray.
The rivers themselves are considered to be living beings by Navajo people. One of them is male and the other is female, and when they come together at the confluence, it creates a special place for Navajo cultural lifeways. The coming together of male and female signifies the teachings of our people. When they come together, it creates a whole other being, and that's something that we need to make sure that we recognize in our daily lives as people, both men and women, and also the genders beyond men and women.
Treat the land like an elder, like a mother who remembers more than she says. Out here, learning comes from listening, from watching, from walking gently, letting the place speak first. The river is not just water. It's a teacher, a relative, male and female coming together with purpose. When you return to these places with respect, they begin to remember you, and maybe you begin to remember yourself. These are not distant stories. These are lived, ancestral realities, rich in ceremonial significance, used by herbalists, steeped in clanship origins, and interwoven with local family histories. To preserve them, we must safeguard access, protect cultural resources, and uphold the historic ties that bind our communities. And we must work across cultures with humility, because cultural awareness strengthens Navajo communities and the agencies who share this work.
You have elders come in and you have youth present, and there is that cultural knowledge sharing, and there's somebody there recording it. You can bring stories back to life. And when they sit and they bounce knowledge off of each other, there's like a remembering that happens, which I've witnessed, which is really beautiful, where, you know, the elders are like, oh yeah, I forgot about this story. And then they tell it again, and then it becomes revitalized and it becomes important again. I try to be like a student. I try to act like a child when I'm around elders.
Sharing those stories, learning from each other, teaching each other. There is a canyon in their backyard that have a really strong cultural history. And that to me is the most important part of working in this for that very reason, is the fact that this is our land and we view this as our land, our resources.
I grew up along the south rim of the Grand Canyon, and as I came and went from my home, I would look down into the canyon. Sometimes we would see river rafters, and I always wanted to be one of them. And my father would tell us stories of the salt mines and the wall of salt. In Navajo, what's called a kashan, what his father and his grandfather told him, but that's how I know it. And it means wall of fat.
What we gain by being here, by watching elders remember and youth learn, is not just cultural insight, it is direction. Experiencing this place directly teaches us something no report or study can capture. But understanding and honoring these lessons requires more than presence. It requires real change in how decisions are made and how Indigenous voices are supported. Cultural competency is the ability to work across cultures with respect, humility, and understanding. It improves how we manage the land and who benefits. It protects Native staff, strengthens collaboration, and ultimately helps agencies make better decisions for everyone. Navajos hired into roles focused on interpretation, cultural resources, or community engagement have often had to navigate the challenges of being placed in highly visible positions without sufficient institutional support. Without preparation, mentorship, or representation, too many Indigenous professionals are set up to bear the burden of change alone.
I made the really difficult decision to leave home and go to Grand Canyon, where they were saying, yes, we're gonna be sharing and elevating these Indigenous voices here because they've been non-existent and very minimal for so long. So we'd really like someone like you here to help that. So I began working as a park ranger at Grand Canyon, and I talked to the seasonal park rangers there. What type of programs are you guys doing regarding Indigenous knowledge? We want to put Indigenous people first, but they're not focusing on their workforce. They were saying we don't have those resources from this federal agency. It's really hard. So I think we should invest in that first, the resources for Native employees, before we start recruiting more.
Federal programs and preservation policies like the National Historic Preservation Act provide a framework, but they cannot substitute for living values. We must go further. If we fail to protect systemic inequity within agencies and institutions, we risk losing the very voices most needed in the work of protecting these places.
The greater good. And the way that's largely interpreted is the greater good for the most people. And Native Americans are not the most people. We're the few people. So it's going to service more of the general population.
I became very aware very quickly that's not a mitigation that do anything. Ultimately, doesn't provide any protection.
It's like using the right tool for the right job. Enlightenment-era science alone won't help you understand this landscape. Navajo knowledge is the more precise tool here. The legacy of exclusion, exploitation, and ecological harm is not just a matter of the past. It echoes in the present. Today, scientists, federal agencies, environmentalists, and institutions have the opportunity and the responsibility to help reverse that legacy. We can choose to be part of an old pattern that erases Indigenous knowledge, or to help build a new path forward, a path rooted in respect, guided by Navajo insight, enriched by collaboration. Navajo values guide how we care for the land, so learn, listen, and partner. Approach this place with respect, curiosity, and a willingness to change.
One thing I'll point out just while this is playing is that the music here, the singing, this is James Sita's father.
My father put out a CD back in over 10 years ago, so we were able to use that music. His name was James
Eric, I just wanted to let you know that James is on.
Okay, great. Thank you, James. So James is here. He's the or online rather. Like I said, he was the one-man show putting all of that together, and we're very grateful. And I also wanted to mention that Kalkiana Yazi is here. You saw her interviewed in the film, and she's sitting in the back of the room here with us. And if you'd like to speak, you're welcome to come up and join us and answer any questions, but you don't have to. But thanks for coming, and thanks to everybody for coming. So the next thing, we just wanted to do a conversation, and Shannon was going to ask a couple of questions that we can respond to.
Eric, can I interrupt you real quick?
Please do.
This gentleman raised his hand and had a question.
Oh, yeah.
Before.
Yeah, just a quick question. In the previous slide,
Mm-hmm.
the water, is that bases?
Yes.
Okay, is it still flowing?
This is also bases. You got two in a row.
Okay,
Yes, the last time I was there about 3 months ago in September, yes.
it's still flowing at a good rate?
Yes.
Uh,
And it changes a lot. I mean, all the times that I've been by and seen that one, I mean, sometimes you barely see a trickle out of it. Sometimes it's roaring. So that one is fairly quickly responsive to the what's going on up on the surface. Some of them less so, but yeah, that one's flowing pretty well lately. I don't know if you know more.
Well, a friend was just down there and he said, "Oh man, it's not doing anything."
Mm.
And then I talked to a buddy that's a river runner. He said, "Oh yeah, it's been gone since 2015 when he started running the river." I don't know, that's why I had to ask.
Oh yeah, it in the past 5 years, I've seen it go from kind of roaring out to trickling to nothing, and it's highly variable as far as I can tell.
Yeah, the year we went was after that heavy winter.
Yes.
We got that a lot of snow. This is 2023, and yeah, we got that.
Yeah, thank you.
What's something you hope people noticed in the film that they may not have words for yet?
You may go first.
Go ahead.
One thing that I like people to think about, and remember, this film is sort of geared toward USGS scientists and resource managers and folks like that, is I think a lot of time people, Westerners, people like myself, get really used to looking at things in this very sort of concrete way where they're looking at it as a rock is a rock, a river is, water that flows. I think that one of the things that it's important to impart here is to think of things in a little bit more of a human way. That I think is what kind of Navajo traditions, that is how they focus on it. The river as a teacher is thinking of the river as a person, right? When you think of it as a person, you respect it in a different way, you think of it a different way, you can have more of a conversation, and you don't really have to think of a conversation as, words that are going back and forth. In kind of, dense anthropological theory, there's a concept called semiotics. And it basically says that communication is so much more than verbal, right? You can look at the form that something grows and know that it values the sun. So it communicates something to you. And it's the same thing with looking at a river and seeing the sediments that are in it, the plants and the animals that are in it, and seeing all of the kind of the richness or lack of richness within it. It's telling us something, right? This Colorado River, it shouldn't really be clear. It should be full of sediments. It should be smelly. It should have lots of bugs. And we don't always see that, right? And so thinking of it that way, I think encourages us to be more respectful and delicate, rather than just looking at it as something that, it's a giant battery and it produces electricity and it holds water. Right. This is something that is there to be respected, and we can learn that if we learn to look at it in this way.
I'll put a little twist on that question. What you answered, what made people have noticed about during watching this. But I think one thing I'd like to talk about is what they might not have noticed, or what's not really clear. And being on the trip, to me, and looking at it, from 3 years ago to the present day, I think one of the most amazing things about that trip was the people. It looks like we're a group that know each other. And it was a group that we had been emailing, and then we met, this was right after COVID times. So it was like coming out of an office space and actually meeting the people that you might have had communications with, and then getting to know them as human beings, and then finding out that their life's journey is very much the same as yours. We all had similar questions, but we not get taught to us culturally by our families. What did we feel was missing as an Indigenous American from the Southwest, and our oral histories tell us we come from the canyon or somewhere nearby. And then this day, being a modern Native American, we have our cell phones and we have our iPad and all that, and then suddenly going out into the wilderness, you're a US citizen most common days before you get into this element. And then the question and the goal of the trip for the Navajo Nation and the tribes was really to try to help others, teach others what our connection is through our history as an Indigenous people to the land. And sometimes that you can grapple with that being a cityfied and all that. But what was really great about the trip was you got back down to the basics, you know, no cell phone, no connection, and you're like in that setting, you felt like you could see a dinosaur come from around the wall of the canyon, and it wouldn't surprise you because you're in such a place that is so pristine and so far removed that anything is possible. So that was kind of the sense that I love watching the documentary, and the group did such a great job. And I see the names of the people and I know who they are. And to have that one human connection for a while in that time and in that space was really wonderful. But then you think the canyon has her own memories. And then you come to find out, if you think of the canyon as a living being, that other life forces have touched it, and yours is just a tiny spark in time with what others have sensed. So that was what I got from the takeaway of what maybe people didn't really see in watching the film. As great as it was, there's a whole backstory. Thank you.
Let me ask James, is there anything, do you want to contribute to that at all? I don't know if you're able to unmute yourself.
I think so. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, I think it's great to be here, and it's great to hear you, James Sita, talk about how the land has memory, and as Navajo and Indigenous peoples, sacred spaces and places, they can, in a way, make their own decisions. And it's also like a lesson in being humble. I think to the question of what may not have come through on like an initial viewing, well, two things come out to me. One, and this was a point in the documentary, and then James Sita touched on the documentary, and then just now. Growing up, I grew up on the Navajo Nation in Lukachikai, and my grandmother was a traditional medicine woman, and my grandfather was also an educator and was really propagated the Navajo culture and the spiritual teachings. So I grew up with Navajo culture classes and books, and I'm fairly well read, as a kid growing up in Navajo culture and significant places. And very, very few times was the Grand Canyon like ever actually like referenced. And so one thing that kind of blew my mind, because my sort of connection to the Grand Canyon, it was never there as a Navajo person until I went there and reading and then seeing a hogan in the Grand Canyon, the crystal hogan. You see images of it in the documentary. That was something that really just it made me angry, because there was, it's no secret that the U.S. history, the United States history has tried to disconnect the land from the people, and the people from the land, and wash their identity from the land. And this was partially achieved because, as educated I was and as like steeped in Navajo culture as I was, I didn't, to me, in my thinking growing up all the way up till I took this trip, the Grand Canyon was a white space, for people who had money and for people who had means and resources to pay that amount of money and then to be there. Like, it was for them. This place had been sort of wiped clean and reset and it wasn't for Navajo people. And so that's something that that still kind of stays with me. And it was great being there, being collaborative also. The amount of scientists that was also on this river expedition, it was great because we have like little almost daily TED Talks of everyone in each of their field explaining why it is they do what they do and why it's important in the grand scheme of things. It was great to have that whole picture. And this documentary isn't to answer all those questions and to offer up, how everything can work together, but to start that conversation so that, not just the people that are the scientists and the archaeologists and the cultural people there, you know, these conversations don't just happen once a year, in the Grand Canyon. I think it's up to us now. And to me, part of the reason why I felt this, one of the many reasons why this documentary was so important, is that it can hopefully start facilitating, take this conversation that normally happens inside this canyon and bring it out. And so that these other scientists, archaeologists, as well as, people who write policy and things like that, the political aspect of it, it can start to come together more. And the one last thing I'll mention on this is that we think of the Grand Canyon and then, it's very separate from itself. It's been segregated. There's the dam, and it's not a lake, it's a reservoir. We got to start calling it a reservoir. And, it's still being treated and like managed as if it's two separate things. There's everything below the dam and everything above it. And we need to reconnect the river to itself again, both metaphorically and literally in many ways. And I think that's one thing that is that I hope that one of the many things that also this documentary helps spark that conversation, hopefully initiate some change in that area. Thanks.
Nice. So I'll ask another question, and this can be for James Sita and or James and Kelki if you're so inclined. When you guys are actually at places like the confluence, what's different about being there versus hearing about it or reading about it? Is there a particular moment that really kind of captures that for you?
Since I'm sitting here, I'll try to answer that. Thank you for that question. I think when you think about it, I knew we were going to go to the confluence. And in my mind, I had heard about the confluence area because I live right up in Cameron, and my grandfather, my father's side of the family, used to live in Tusayan. They have Hogan remnants there at just southeast of Red Butte, but there was Navajos all that way, and Wallapai and Havasupai too. But so I had a sense of where the confluence was, and I just thought of it as kind of almost a mythical place in my mind. So when we actually got there and we're sitting at the point of where the two rivers came together, the Little Colorado River and the Big Colorado River, I realized that it is really a real place. It's not a storybook. And I think at that time and then afterwards, I think of it as melding the reality of what being there and knowing the history and the teachings of the people to that place was really a once in a lifetime thing. And one thing that I did do when I was sitting in the water in the film was that I collected white clay from the edge of the riverbed, and the female group of our team went up the Little Colorado River a while, and we actually were in the river playing. It was so fun. But I collected white sand from the riverbed, and I brought it home, carried it for 2 weeks, and then I brought it to Tuba City to my grandmother, who was a medicine woman. And she said, and I told her where that clay came from, because it was white like this. it wasn't salt. And I told her where I got it from. And she said, take very, very good care of this clay. And she says, when you move into a home, this is the clay that you bless the new home with, like and the traditional hogan, it's the doorway and the different sides of the hogan. And so so I did take care of it, and what I did was I didn't want it to be wasted on me, because I know I'm not going to be buying home after home. So I divided it up, and I gave it to medicine men and women that I know. And I told them where it came from, and to only use it sparingly in the most powerful and precious ceremonies that they needed to do. So I paid it forward. But so that's my experience, my takeaway, and my memory of being in the canyon.
Erik, what are some of the actual results or recommendations from this monitoring program?
So I think, like, in the long term, the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program has been around for 30 years, 35 years. And I think it started off being very focused on, things like sediments, fish, how erosion was affecting archaeological sites. But after, the input of the Navajo Nation monitoring program and other tribal monitoring programs, there started to be a little bit more focus on just really what James Sita was talking about, is like these traditional cultural places, right? It may not have been seen as important at the beginning of this program to be looking out for a place and monitoring a place like the confluence, or like the salt mines or the hematite mines. The way that the dam flows are regulated, they allow more people to be down there and do different kinds of activities. So they're going to have a higher kind of impact just by the fact that more people are down there than were, hundreds and thousands of years ago. So there's different pressures on those things. So, now through these programs, we're saying, hey, these are really important kind of tribal Navajo resources, and those need to be monitored and paid attention to. Also, like a place, for example, like the salt mines, they had been impacted for thousands, millions of years by floods. That doesn't happen anymore. We don't really have floods that would kind of clean and wash those places out. So now this is something that we have to pay a little bit closer attention to. And also, this is something that was alluded to earlier. Also, just the fact that this is a gigantic group of people from, you have water attorneys from Wyoming. You have fish biologists from Utah, all different kinds of people. Participation in this program has given us an opportunity to interact with all of those other folks, and we learn from them, they learn from us. And so there's a lot of kind of knowledge trading that goes on. That's not really, the kind of hard science where you go up and you say that, the humpback chub, there's, we counted 80,000 humpback chub in the Little Colorado. That's what a lot of people are interested in. But some of it is just the fact that there's a forum for all of these different stakeholders to speak and communicate. Because in the past, the Navajo Nation, and they didn't necessarily have a voice in this. Certainly not an equal voice, if one at all. And so these programs, and being able to invite some of these folks from the USGS who are doing the scientists or doing this science, or the Park Service or reclamation, they now get to spend time when they join us on these trips, and they get to learn about what the values are. And that informs the decisions they make and how they interpret the data that they come up with. So there's a lot of different ways to answer that question, but I think those are a couple of the most couple of things that come to my mind about it.
Jamesita, how do these trips change the questions that people ask afterward? Scientists, managers, or even community members?
Thank you for that question. I think one of the things that I just want to point out, and I'm going to take a step back from the Navajo Nation, because I was at that time the tribal liaison, but since then have been forced to resign. And so I am now at ASU Sandra Day O'Connor Law School, and I don't have the federal restrictions of not being a human being and speaking to my experience and what I gained as a human being on the river trip. And I think one of the things that this question makes me think about was how we're now talking in this room about the Navajo Nation, but there's so many other tribes that the canyon and the land and everything belongs to through their history, their ancestry. So it's sacred and connected to the people far beyond the Navajo people, even though the canyon is in this area, the western border of the Navajo Nation. So I think one of the things that impacted the program and the scientists and the people that work with in government is that we have to take all the history and respect all the people that are so very diverse and different, like the Pueblo people, the Athabascan people, and these are the different tribes that are divided by linguistics. And it was for me at the time that I was working with the 5 tribes, I realized that the Havasupai people weren't part of the agreement. And the Havasupai people are the ones that live in the canyon and they're directly impacted. And one of the questions I had was, why aren't the Havasupai people at the table here? And so on and so forth. So one of the things about government and funding and policies is that you have to have these people, these stakeholders at the table, and you have to work together and you have to go through all the different places that they each are at and hopefully come to some kind of plan to keep the indigenous people relevant and their narrative is spoken with truth and honesty in a human and compassionate way, because really that is the beauty and the strength of our country and what our people call Indian country or indigenous lands. So when when the Navajo Nation hires a white guy to run the program, we're inclusive and we have to figure these things out for all future generations and make sure that the planning for the water and the land and the people is all there, that we all have to survive on this planet together. We only get one planet. And that goes for the federal government, the state government, folks upriver, upper basin, lower basin, and even the folks down in Mexico that have depended for thousands and thousands, if not millions of years for water from the big Colorado and living through climate change. So that's what I think about that when we have all these scientists and staff and employees sitting together and talking about the future of the river and the canyon. From my perspective, each of those employees was a great human being, but the greater bureaucracy and the is hard to move. So, but I can say that now truthfully because I'm a free person.
Civilian, I guess.
Yes, a civilian.
Thank you. The phrase river is a teacher can sound poetic, but in practice, what does it actually ask of people?
James, I would be curious if you're open to answering that question.
Sure. And well, with so many things, I think in westernized culture, we've lost not lost, but something that isn't as practiced as it was or is developing this humble posture of learning. And growing up Navajo, this is taught in different ways. It could be one of the ways is when you're young, you're still a child, your family gives you a little lamb to take care of. And it's fun and it's difficult, and the adults help you with it, but they kind of give you that nobility and giving you that responsibility and trusting you with it and then helping you out with it. And, as you would get older, there is more lessons to be learned. And there's this constant learning that should keep happening as you keep evolving. Medicine people, we consider them like doctors in a lot of ways, and even they're the first people to admit that there's more to learn. And so River's teacher, it's I think this was well written. In the documentary, and James Seed has alluded to this a couple earlier as well a few times, is that this it's a living place, and treating a place, a sacred space, like it actually is sacred. But then what does that actually mean? I think as a Western culture, we're very detached from what that word actually means, the implications of that. And if you were to treat it like a person, with its own autonomy, you would learn from it, and you would treat it like almost like a parent, or a grandparent. And I think that's really the best metaphor we can think of. And I think it's calling all of us, Navajos, other tribes, politicians, scientists, archaeologists, anthropologists, to really come together and to develop that humble posture of learning together. That way, if we're all humble, then we can all admit we have something to learn from each other and go forward in a way that is more respectful, more reverent, and that gives the sort of nobility and respect to the land and the teacher in this instance what it deserves. And I think it has various meanings like that. Those are my initial thoughts.
I have some thoughts on that too. I think one of the most greatest teachings that has been handed down in my family was the day that I joined the military, and I'm a Persian Gulf War veteran, Desert Storm War veteran. And when I came home and I had my ceremonies of my people and all these 9-day ceremony prayers and the whole clan and the community came together, and it takes you when you're sitting in a ceremony and hearing the chants and being in a hogan with your relatives and even strangers around you, and they're praying for you through the chants of the Navajo medicine men. And it's like meditation, I would guess, in other regions of the world. And what you do is it takes you through from this moment to the very beginning of time and space, and the chant brings you back in the footsteps of the holy people back to where you're sitting right here, right now in the Foguth. We're having a ceremony, or in this case, where I'm sitting by Erik in Page CCC classroom. So you go on this journey, your spirit goes on this journey, and you come back cleansed and rejuvenated and revived and having more of a sense of purpose. That understanding our connection to the earth and our holy people through who we are as human beings, through our ancestry. And we have respect for every other person and being's understanding of their own, where they come from, where their teachings are. But for me, and this is where my story is going, as a veteran, when I came back and had the ceremonies, grappling with all the things that you think about, my father says to me, think about how important Indigenous veterans are. He says, remember, like the Navajo code talker. They went from being little kids herding sheep out in the desert to being in a foreign land. And the one thing you must remember is that child, that little boy, the last words out of his mouth is Shama, which means my mother. And my father says, it's not just a mother. He says, we have to think about the greater meaning of those last words. Shama means my Mother Earth. So we come from her and we go back to her. And that, I just turned 58 today. Today is my birthday. And
Happy birthday.
thank you. My family had to call me to remind me. But I mean, as you can see, it is the most powerful message to me. And this is what I feel is the most important connection of the Navajo to our place on this earth. And other people have their respective meaningful sacred places. And we each should have that special place for each of us to give us meaning and mission for our lives and purpose. So, but this is specifically for the Navajo. And so I just wanted to share that with you, just adding on to what James said. Thank you.
Thank you. If someone leaves tonight with one shift in how they think about rivers or land, what would you hope that is?
James, do you want to take a shot?
A shift in rivers or land. Well, thinking about these rivers, the Colorado River, the Little Colorado River, and many others, I think we need to sort of wake up to just what it is we've done to them. If it's a body, or if it's the metaphor of veins and it nourishing and bringing nourishment, literal nourishment to other places of the land that have far-reaching thousands of miles. We cut it, we chopped it up, we cut off its head in some ways, and I think that if you were to do the same to a human body, it would create huge problems. And I think we need to start to wake up to some of what those problems are now. And there's something special about visiting a river. It really is like kind of going back to an earlier question, a personal experience with the river. Um, I grew up going to Tache, which is like a Navajo sweat lodge, and ours was in the ground. And one of the ways that it was kind of explained to me is more than one, is that as a young person, you going back into the earth where it's warm, where there's lava rock and there's steam and there's prayer and it's complete darkness. It's like going back into the womb of the earth. Earth is mother to us all. You're going back into the Mother Earth's womb. And there it's you and her, and there's prayer that exists. And there's a spiritual connection that really brings you to the earth. And growing up with that practice, it has helped me stay humble. But during this expedition a couple of years ago, I had a very similar moment where I felt the same, but I wasn't in the ground. I was in the Little Colorado River and still praying and still washing myself with mud and having this moment of just kind of meeting another mother figure. And it was very emotional for me. And I think that, visiting and looking at all of these places with spiritual eyes and not just seeing it as, a resource, because then you're not giving it credit. When you view people as just resources, then that opens the door for humans to be abused. The land is no different. And I think, you know, I had that experience. And I think when people look at rivers, and especially these ones, we need to start treating them with more nobility and more respect as if they were people. Thank you.
Yeah, come on up. Microphone's right here.
Oh. Hi, everyone. My name is Kelkiana Yazi. I work as a tribal liaison at Grand Canyon National Park. So I work with the park's 11 associated tribes, including the Navajo Nation. And I'm a tribal member myself. And I've been working there for the past 5 years now. And I always hear tribes call the canyon and the river a living landscape. And when I went on this river trip with Eric and Jamasita and James, it was my first river trip in the Grand Canyon ever. And when I was down there, I didn't know what to expect, but what I felt was that this place was living. And I remember we went to Saddle Canyon, I think it's called. It was like this little slot canyon, and there was these springs dripping above me. And I just recently lost two of my family members, my aunt and my cousin brother. And when I was looking at those dripping springs, I knew they were right there. Like I knew, like our ancestors are present in that space. And that's how I felt at the confluence as well, because that's considered for not just Navajo Nation, but many other tribes like Hopi and Zuni, that's an ancestral resting space. And you can really feel it when you're in not just the confluence, but the whole canyon itself. And it helps you feel familiar with the place you've never been or experienced before. And that really helped because we were on the river for 10 days and we didn't see any other Native people the entire time we were on the trip. It was just us. And that was really eye-opening. Like, wow, we had this deep, rich, cool, this connection to this space, but where are we in this space? So that's what really sticks with me with being down in the river. And I actually got to join a Yavapai Apache youth river trip, which was the first Indigenous youth river trip that was sponsored by the National Park Service. And we went down there, and all of those kids have never been there before too, but they all said the same thing. They're like, this is like, feels like home to us. And when we were at the confluence, we shared that important way to show respect is silence and quiet. And so they're like, okay. And then all these commercial river trips and private boaters showed up, and they had their floaties and they're yelling and screaming down down the ripples there in the rapids. And the kids ran up to us and we're like, can we go tell them to be quiet? Can we go tell them like what the space is? And we're like, yeah. So the tribal youth were the ones educating the river goers while we were down there. And I think that's important to kind of wrap what I'm trying to say is that our youth is the next generation. And it's important for them to be those voices down in a space like this. So hopefully we see more of them, of us, bringing our knowledge holders down to share that space and that knowledge with us. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I know we're close on time, but I wanted to add in a little bit more of that. Is that just Kelky, what you were saying about, younger people, younger Navajos, they need to be learning about this too. And we do try to use these trips as an opportunity to bring folks in. They can be hard because they're, 10 days and a lot of people have jobs or they're in school and things like that. So it's really difficult. And we understand that, there's a lot of a great sacrifice to that. And, part of it is myself as an outsider. I mean, for those of you that don't know me, I am not Navajo. I'm not Indigenous. I've lived here in Page for 15 years, and I've felt very fortunate to be able to have been brought into these spaces. And though I think there's a lot to go, right? When we talk about, having more Navajo people that are working for the National Park Service, it's pretty interesting that we're sitting here and that me as an outsider works for the Navajo Nation and Kelky works for the National Park Service. And you're learning a lot of different things, like being over there and able to teach people. And it's the same experience for me. Like if somebody were to, when we talk about what does sacred mean, a lot of what I gather and glean is somebody once told me that, the mountain is like a mother, right? The San Francisco Peaks, don't go sleep. Would you exploit your mother that way? And it really hit me. I thought like that's an amazing way to be able to explain that. And it's taken me kind of years to kind of hear these things over and over and to understand like that is how an outsider, maybe a non-Navajo, non-Indigenous person, could understand that. And at some point, perhaps I will go and work for the National Park Service or elsewhere, but I'll be able to bring all of this knowledge and experience back out there. And like I said, I'm just so grateful for having been given the opportunity to learn this and to learn what really respecting a landscape and learning from a river and people is. So I think maybe we should.
We have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be
great.
great.
Be able to entertain a few questions from our audience here in person and also from the chat. We're gonna go first to Kelly. I wanted to ask if there are opportunities to include more Navajo Rangers in cultural trips and whether the Navajo Nation might be able to advocate for more of these trips for their people. She shared that she's worked at the Grand Canyon for 5 years as a Diné interpreter and haven't been on a trip yet. And is wondering if that might be an opportunity to be a part of that and reconnect with her culture and feel those experiences. She shared that those are especially important for the work that all of us do.
Well, I'll probably give the easiest answer of the night. Yes. Just call me or email me and you're on the trip. How's that?
We're all signing up.
Love it. Are there any questions from our audience?
Heard a lot about the Navajo connection to the river. You said there's 5 tribes. So is there any overlying organization of all the tribes put together, sharing viewpoints, or do all the native people share the same exact culture and viewpoints of the river?
So thank you for that question. So the Glen Canyon Dam Adaptive Management Program had a 5-year plan, and they sent out, I don't know, back in the 1990s, sent out letters to the tribes to see who wanted to participate in the some of these new programs that were started, and some of the tribes didn't respond. So that's how some of the tribes were included. And so and they have gotten letters over the years asking them if they want to participate, and some don't want to participate. So I guess it depends on each tribe and each leadership administration how they want to go. But part of the program was the funding was there, but each tribe had to come up with their own idea creation to fulfill a cultural connection to be taught. It's actually to be, this film is actually in the deliverable statement scope of work. It says it's a training tool for new hires within the federal government that will be working on the river, and not necessarily with the tribes, but this is an HR video. So each tribe, like Zuni's gonna do something, Hopi's gonna do their own thing, Wallapai and Kaibat Paiute. So to answer your question, the funding and the federal funding is an umbrella for these 5 tribes, but I as the tribal liaison that was supposed to help coordinate that, I can tell you that 5 tribes, they each have their own idea, their own identity, and they don't want to be categorized in one group. So it was just really, hopefully each of the tribes comes up with another sharing tool, but it might not look exactly like this.
Through time.
Yeah, so yeah, and getting very different tribes to agree on something, it was very hard, and I think that was probably the hardest part of my job. So, yeah, thank you for your question.
The more people that are included, the more influence
Yes,
on
yes,
political ramifications of
yeah,
the entire
Yeah.
environment.
yeah. Did you want to add anything? You want to add anything?
I think you said it.
Okay.
Yeah, but at the Grand Canyon National Park, we do heavily emphasize on river education, regarding tribal knowledge. So like the guide training seminar is coming up in Marble Canyon next month, run by the Grand Canyon River Guides, and a couple of our staff members are going there to talk about Indigenous connections to the Colorado River, because that knowledge is absent, and we've seen that the younger generation of river guides is very receptive to share out these perspectives on their river trip. So really excited about that and other opportunities to share out on tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
General, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say in terms of like, what tribes are, interested or related. I mean, there's many more, but sometimes I think just as a governmental capacity to participate in these things, not all have the same sort of proximity or resources to kind of participate in these things. And I mean, that's the sad fact of it, is that, in the past, the amount of resources that you have, funding, basically, can you hire lawyers? Can you hire experts? Can you hire these people to go in and, influence the government and participate in this program? Not all tribes have that. One thing that is sort of unique about the way that this program works is that the dam makes a lot of money, right? And so there's what's called the Basin Fund, and that is what is used to fund all of the science now. And these programs, the one that we're talking about here, the Navajo Nation Monitoring Program, those are funded through revenues from the dam. And so otherwise, it's really hard to sustain a program like this. So the other part of that is, there are tribes that have chosen not to, because they don't want to take the money from the dam for reasons that I'm sure you can understand. It's had some very negative impacts on the river and on the place and on the kind of integrity of the place. And so they don't, nope, we don't want your money. And that is a, you know, a reasonable and sort of thoughtful approach to it. But it's difficult because then sometimes there's no representation there. So it's a complicated set of trade-offs that that a lot of those folks have to make.
I think you guys might have answered my question, concerning the Havasupai. Without being too specific.
Yeah, I think one of the
Yes.
things that, the tribes, even within one tribe, people might have various views about what is appropriate to share and what is not appropriate to share. And so even though the salt mines might be sacred to all the tribes, one tribe might think it's not appropriate to share anything about it, and the other tribe might say, oh, well, we can share some photos, but don't give people the GPS coordinates, you know? So that kind of thing.
Are they in fact sacred to all the tribes?
I wouldn't know, I would think so, but I really wouldn't know. I know they are to Zuni, Navajo, Hopi. All 5 tribes?
I think the Wallapai too.
The Wallapai, yeah.
That's- yeah, that's
Cause
right.
it's been a resource since ancient times for that salt.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you know, you can think of it both in kind of a spiritual way, but in a practical way. I mean, these areas did not have a lot of access to salt. And if you've ever been out in the desert and you drank Gatorade or something with a lot of sodium in it, you know how important it is. And it was important in that way. And also, you know, for Navajo, I mean, Salt Woman is one of the most important sort of deities and characters. And I mean, that is how you know she was there. And so people have been going there to visit for thousands of years.
Final thoughts from our panel.
I just want to say one thing. I think one of the things that Navajo medicine people, one of the things that they really tried to touch on is the place for humans' place in the world. And on this river trip, a question came up to me that I still have no answer, but it's still something that comes to me, is how far are we willing to use or how far are we as human beings willing to be unnatural, live in unnatural settings, be unnatural, till it overuses and taxes the resources that we have in nature around us. And coming up over the highway, coming this way from where I live for this event, I saw how far, I mean, I didn't even see the lake, I mean, the reservoir, I didn't see the water. All I see is sand. So I'm wondering, how far are we willing to use up what is naturally gifted to us to live in comfort, what is an unnatural setting for us as animals, and we're just really purely basically animals. So, and I think that's something my ancestors would have, the Hatwatlis and the medicine men would have asked in our current situation or state of things. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to every single person who's here physically as well as online. Just being here to listen to this presentation and these perspectives, because I've worked for the federal government for 10 years now, and there's very few Indigenous people in these roles, in these positions with the federal bureaucracy, that we have historical trauma and these very negative ties to based on past and current actions. And a lot of the time, with there being so few of us, it's like, is anyone even hearing us or listening to us? And a lot of it, we just had to end up relying and depending on other, like our Native colleagues. I'm actually here with Linda. who I met at Grand Canyon, and she works here at Glen Canyon now. And that was a lot of our experiences working at Grand Canyon together, is that it wasn't just a 9 to 5 job to us. It was our livelihood. It was our lived experiences. It was 24/7 for us. We felt it outside of work. And that's why these issues heavily impact us, because again, it's our heritage, it's our culture that's being affected in these land management agencies. So yeah, just want to say thank you to everyone being here, just listening and actively participating. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, James, do you want to get the last word?
Just thank you. And really consider what does it actually mean? What are the implications of having a humble posture of learning to bring that balance, that spiritual aspect and harmony that our whole human race needs to have with the earth is, and also like stop calling it a lake. We're all people who are here to learn more, and so we could help. In addition to stop calling it a lake, call it a reservoir. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And just now, it seems like a lot of the fruits of the labor that people like James Sita and Kelkiana and Erik and so many but that came before us, like we're finally getting that decision-making power back. And there still needs to be more of that work done. So as just a general like call to action to everyone who's listening, we need to bring in that balance. Is a part of that is making sure that the right people have decision making power. And yeah, thank you. This has been a surprising, and I always learn a lot when I listen to James Sita, and I'm very happy to be. It was a privilege. It was a blessing to be part of this whole process and to tell this story. Thank you.
And I also just want to say that, this is the first time we've really presented this. We had planned to do it in some other formats, but we're slowed down by the government shutdown. So this really turned out to be the first time that we've showed it more broadly. And we really appreciate that you all showed up in person and online to see it. Feel free to be in touch with any of us if you have any more questions or interested in participating somehow.